Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we examine the mobile home of the Unforgiven, the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, the Rock. It was once part of the Dark Angels' homeworld of Caliban, a place for Knights of the Order to go. This fortress was named Alderuk, and this translated as Rock of Eternity, a very appropriate motif. The name had originally just been applied to the mountain of Caliban. Stones at the base of the mountain showed the stages of a knight's life, from joining the order to growing old in the order. And knights would touch the stones and recall past generations. Inside the monastery, a knight's skills would be developed. They would over time take on the cause to fight the great beasts of Caliban, protecting the innocents. Within the monastery, the main building was known as the Tower of Angels, and it was there the order's Grand Master and other masters would reside, as would the council chamber, where the order would meet other visiting knights, a place where all can be equal, and the hall itself was large enough to hold thousands of knights, novices, and supplicants on its stone benches. The roof was supported by mighty pillars, which gave way to Gothic arches. The walls were stained glass, showing the history of the order. Some displayed the Lion and Luther. The ceiling was covered in banners that displayed great deeds of the order, and in the tower's heart was Lord Cypher, who had the role of overseeing the customs of the other brothers within the order to make sure their history is preserved, and this extended to the appropriate protocols at any official ceremonies. He would also, in its catacombs, meet initiates and envelop them in the order and its ways. And in M40, perhaps this role of tradition is the one the current Cypher, whoever he is, still plays, though his actions are as ever ambiguous. Should the initiates continue in the order, the masters of the order at each stage will approve them moving to the next stage. The only difference with this is when the Lion picks someone out for special attention. These traditions changed little until the arrival of the Emperor, who transformed the forests, turning them into mines and refineries, resources for his crusade. And there was quite an amusing controversy when there were lifts put into the rock to access its lower levels. Senior knights thought this went against tradition. You would usually take the errant road up to the castle gates, and so those that walked with tradition still would take that path. Training went on inside, but its objective had changed. Now it was to find candidates to join the Legion of the Lion, and many found that success. It was at this time that the monastery became the centre of selection for this process. And then the Heresy happened. An increase in great beasts and a broad rebellion led Luther to rule in Caliban whilst the Lion was out on his father's great crusade, and Luther declared Caliban to be independent. The Lion returned and had found what had happened here, and ordered an orbital bombardment against the traitors to the Imperium. At this time, the Lion went down to the planet to deal with Luther, and as he did, the bombardment began to break the world apart. The Lion faced Luther, who was now elevated by chaos, and Luther was able to mortally wound the Lion. After this, Luther had a moment of realization of what he had done to his old friend, and falls down next to him. The planet heaves and twists under the orbital bombardment and breaks apart, becoming engulfed in a warp storm. But the rock survived, protected by shields of immense power, perhaps something from the dark age of technology. Gravitic fields envelop the monastery and the bedrock beneath, but that was all that remained. And so it was that the angels found a mentally broken Luther. He says one thing: the Lion has been carried away by the watchers in the dark, and one day will return and forgive him. And the angels go about rebuilding the rock, turning it into a base of operations. They find Dark Age technology, a great void shield generator, and within the catacombs of the bedrock of the rock, Labour dig deep into its heart to create enough room for the Legion, and priests of the Mechanicum add space docks, allowing Voidcraft to come and go from the Dark Angel's base of operations. They could come to life, visited by Thunderhawk gunships and escort frigates. This and more took place over centuries until the rock had a fitted warp drive, so the headquarters can travel amongst the stars in support of its ships. The rock moves around from planet to planet, never staying in one place for too long, but being there long enough for the chapter to recruit from those planets. But the rock remained grim in aspect, made of cold stone, a mobile tomb of a once living world. It's bigger than many starships, and armed outside on the rock itself are placed many weapons, an armoury of weapons, turrets to lance batteries, from observation blisters to torpedo tubes. The ruins where the Tower of Angels had once stood and where Luther and the line had fought is left alone, some sense of gravity of what had happened there turning others away. It's a mausoleum now, but some areas of the fortress monastery still stand protected by the rock's shields, and within these debris are statues, figures from Caliban's past. Because of some unknown effect, the eyes of these statues glow. They are dubbed the Stone Guardians, or the 10 Brothers of the Order. They are stored within the rock, and they are used as a war asset for the Angels. Mounted on a land speeder chassis, they are dubbed Raven Wing Dark Shrouds, and these shrouds can obscure bikes and light vehicles the Angels use in combat, making them harder for the enemy to see them approaching, or perhaps to target. It is deep within the rock where the fallen are brought by the Angels to be redeemed by interrogator chaplains. Knowledge of this place, like much with the Angels, is not known by all. The Supreme Grand Master of the chapter, example, knows some secrets, others do not. One is that Luther is alive within the rock. Alive but insane, and no Grand Master has convinced Luther at this point to repent. Luther lives on in a single cell. Only the Watchers in the dark and the Supreme Grand Master can walk there. To reach him, you must get past locked gates and so many feet of adamantine walls that it's very hard to reach him. And there are also runes that are potent and keep would-be rescuers out, and Luther within. The Supreme Grand Master needs his power sword, the Sword of Secrets, to gain access to the cell. He places it in a cleft in the wall to get in. And of course, as well as Luther, there is a room for the Lionel Johnson, who sleeps under the eye of the Watchers, until Gaines Workshop recently brought him fully back. And in fact, Luther has also escaped. He did this as the Great Rift opened and demons penetrated the rock. How he escaped is at this moment unknown. And finally, one other nice little piece of lore. There's a key member of the rock, of those who, we'll say, staff it. It's a Marine dubbed the Master of the Forge, the role known to most of the chapters as a Tech Marine. This Master will be hardwired into the rock itself, like all those given the mantle in the past, linked to the control system of the rock, and given the task of working with the machine spirits of the Dark Angel's base, with particular focus on its vital warp engines. Only the mind of this Marine is needed, much less so the body, and around this Marine will be the previous Masters of the Forge. Within the Unforgiven's base, the remains of flesh and bone left where they died over time. These bodies will eventually be placed in a spot of honour within the darkness within the rock. And that, friends, that little look through the history of the rock and some of the things that take place in it will end today's video.